So Huawei has a brand new MateBook in town. It's the MateBook 14. And I'm not talking about the D14 that was released a couple of years ago. I'm talking about a product that sits directly between the MateBook 13 and the more expensive X Pro. In fact, I think this one is probably the MateBook that most people should be looking at. It's 400 pounds cheaper than the X Pro, but still has very similar hardware. Now, in terms of design, you're looking at a very clean look. Last year, they had the flower on top of the device with the Huawei logo or Huawei name just below it. This year they're just going clean Huawei across the middle, and I think it looks a little bit more sleek. It's still made out of all aluminum, so it feels very premium. It is slightly heavier than the X Pro at around 3.2 pounds. The X Pro just comes under 3 pounds. The port situation is kind of good too because you're getting tons of I/O. On the left-hand side, you're getting USB Type-C. It is not Thunderbolt 3. You do get Thunderbolt 3 on the X Pro. You have an audio jack and a full-size HDMI port, which you don't get on the X Pro. On the right-hand side, you have 2 USB ports. One is 2.0 and the other one is 3.1. So getting inside is super easy. You just remove a bunch of screws and the back lid pops off. Once you're in, not much is upgradable. You can replace the Wi-Fi card if you ever want to, but this one's fine. It's the 9560 and it's more than capable. Or the M2 NVMe drive. This one's really fast, getting good read and write speeds, but if you want something bigger down the road, like 1 terabyte, at least you have that option. CPU, GPU, and RAM is all soldered onto the motherboard. The battery, 57 watt hours. I'm getting some fantastic battery life on this thing. Easily 11 to 12 hours of use before needing to charge. It uses USB Type-C and it charges fairly quickly. Now the cooling solution is not my favorite. I'll talk about heat a little bit later, but basically we have 2 heat pipes and 1 fan cooling the CPU and the GPU. The next main difference is the display. On the MateBook 14, you're getting a 13.9-inch display and a 3:2 aspect ratio, which is exactly what the X Pro has. But the big difference comes down to the resolution and, of course, the panel behind it. On this, you're getting 2160 by 1440 compared to 3000 by 2000. Quite honestly, 1440 is more than enough for a 14-inch display. I can barely tell the difference in terms of pixels compared to the X Pro. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have Windows Hello because the camera is built into the keyboard, so there's no infrared sensors. It does have a fingerprint sensor to quickly log you in, and I find it's very accurate. Now, if you do want to use the camera, you gotta pop it out, and it's gonna stare up your nose. It is definitely not the best placement for a camera. Now, some might argue they actually prefer that just because it's a little bit more discreet. You don't see it, you don't have to worry about being on, but overall, I'd like my webcam to be on top of the display. Next is the sound. It's another difference between the X Pro. On this guy, you're getting 2 speakers on the bottom, and because they're facing the desk, they are a bit echoey and they are a bit tinny. The sound itself is not too bad though. It does get quite loud. But if you want the better sound, you gotta switch over to the X Pro. This guy has forward-facing speakers. It has 4 speakers inside of here, and the sound is exceptional. Now, a really cool feature that Huawei introduced is something called Huawei Share. Think of Apple's AirPlay, but for Huawei devices. You need a Huawei smartphone and obviously one of the new MateBooks to do this, but essentially allows you to transfer stuff from your phone to the laptop using a much faster connection than typical Bluetooth. The way it works is very simple. You basically place your Huawei device on top of the laptop and you'll get a notification. You hit connect and automatically I have a transfer connection between the phone and the laptop. Once I hit authorized, I can basically go into the gallery of my phone and bring photos to it. So for example, let's say I wanna transfer this photo I took in Vienna to my computer. I don't have to go to share and then select drive or select email. I simply just open up the photo, tap it on the laptop, and boom, it loads up on the computer. So performance is very interesting on this guy. What you're essentially getting is 2 options, i5 or i7 8565U, which is the latest Whiskey Lake processors. When it comes to the CPU itself, it doesn't run as fast as something like the CPU in the Razer Blade Stealth 2019. And that's because the cooling on the Stealth 2019 is better than the cooling on the MateBook 14. However, the new MX250, which is 25 watts, is faster than the 25 watt version of the MX150. Now the thing is, it's not significantly faster. Like based on benchmarks and Firestrike, for example, I'm only seeing a slight improvement with the MX250 compared to last year's MX150. Now the CPU is a different story, and that pretty much comes down to the cooling solution Huawei has used on their laptops. If you don't remember before, I said that Huawei is using a 1 fan solution. I really wish they went with a 2-fan solution very similar to the Razer Blade Stealth 2019, because when it came to stuff like PC Mark, Cinebench, or any other type of CPU intensive benchmark, the Stealth 2019 beat out the MateBook 14, and the reason being is because the CPU is properly cooled. For example, when both of these computers are under full load, this drops down to 1.4 gigahertz per second to keep the CPU cool. The Stealth, on the other hand, stays at 1.8 because there's more adequate cooling to keep the CPU speeds higher. Fan noise is not too bad either. When it's idle, you don't really hear the fans too much, not really a major concern, quiet enough for a library setting. However, if you are doing something intensive at 100% CPU utilization, the fans will go up to about 52 decibels, so they do become noticeable. Now, the keyboard is exceptional. They actually improved it from last year. The X Pro has a similar layout, so the layout itself hasn't changed, but what has changed is the tactile feeling of the keys themselves. I'm finding these ones are a bit more stiff, making it a little bit more enjoyable to use, but overall, great job. Unfortunately, you don't get a glass touchpad with the MateBook 14. It is plastic, so you can definitely tell the difference between this touchpad and the one on the X Pro. It is using Windows Precision drivers, but you're missing some of that awesome accuracy that you get with glass. So here are my closing thoughts. The MateBook 14 is an exceptional Ultrabook, and I think it's the right MateBook between all three that are currently coming out in the market. Sure, it doesn't have Thunderbolt 3, it doesn't have a glass touchpad, it only has 2 speakers instead of 4, and it's slightly heavier than the MateBook X Pro, but the internals are perfect, the screen is still gorgeous, and overall it's still a really light laptop. If those other features are super important to you, then you gotta go out and spend the 400 pounds more on the X Pro. But I think for everybody else, the MateBook 14 might make the most sense. Anyways, that wraps up this review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Links to it will be in the description down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.